There's not enough time to finish the 150. But that would segregate everyone's knowledge. Like if you got up to 120, you had to really know the material. But it was an old Scantron. She just think and go, and just tell
I mean, now they brought their laptops and just type in all the answers. So a lot of it's already graded.
Oh, that's
graded instantly.
Would be awesome if it just told you instantly you do it and watch the psychology of people just melting down. Get question one wrong and then just oh no, I'm off to a bad start. Should we start?
I always make question one easy so they feel like they at least.
Hello everyone! Please take your seats. We're ready to begin. I'm Michael Whitley from the Adult Ed Committee, and we are extremely lucky today to have Dr. Christine Jeske here to speak with us. Dr. Jeske is an associate professor of anthropology at Wharton College with expertise in helping people live good and just lives in this multicultural world. She writes and speaks widely on topics of race, work, vocation, faith, and the good life. Her publications include Racial Justice for the Long Haul, which is coming out soon, The Laziness Myth, which I have read, and a number of other books, chapters, and articles. For a decade prior to teaching at Wharton, Dr. Jeske lived in Nicaragua, China, and South Africa, where she worked with a variety of economic empowerment initiatives. She and her husband are fortunate to have raised chickens, pigs, innumerable weeds, and 2 wonderful children. Please welcome Dr. Jeske.
Some of you caught it. I am not at Wharton. Maybe would love to be there, but I am not.
I said Wharton.
Yeah. And I live here in Madison. I go down to Wheaton on Tuesday morning, stay there 2 nights, and come back on Thursday. So thankfully, I did not have to drive in the freezing. Oh, yeah. Let's try it again. How's that? That's so loud. Okay, yeah. So I did not have to drive in the freezing cold today, which was very nice. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here. I will just tell you straight up, I had a talk I was thinking about giving you that I had kind of planned for a different event, and did in the last 24 hours had this inspiration that I'm going to change it. And because I actually want to do something a little bit more interactive with you for sort of today. Somebody warned me that with Presbyterians, maybe you need an extra cup of coffee and an extra donut to get interactive, but we're going to do some things that are a little bit more classroom style, and I think will be just more memorable and kind of set you up for ongoing discussions as a group too. My hope is not that you just sort of hear what I say, but that it actually prompts you to think about how it relates to your life. So with that said, be warned, there's some activity you will get to participate in. But I want to start with a story. So I am about 13 years old. I am at a Brewer game with my parents and my grandparents. And it is Father's Day. We've decided to go to the Brewer game because my grandfather loves the Brewers, and so this was a gift for him. We're having a great time doing a tailgate beforehand. We're walking in the stadium. I'll mention who is not there at the time was some of my closest relatives, including my cousin, who I would see about every month or more growing up, close to my age, and her family was not there. I had recently learned that one of the reasons I had never met her father was that when her parents got married, my grandfather said he would not go to their wedding because my uncle is Black. My grandfather also said that he would never set foot in their home, and never did until later in life they got divorced. So this is going on in the background. I had recently learned this about my grandfather, but I also knew my grandfather's a wonderful person, kind, taught me how to grow apples, which I still do to this day. But we're going into this Brewers game, and we're getting to the stadium. I'm walking in front with my grandma and my parents. My brother and grandfather are behind me. My brother says something to me. I turn around, I face them, and I see this look come over my grandfather's face that just goes blank. And then he proceeds to fall on his face without putting his hands out. Just falls down. And everybody's like, what just happened? People start screaming and calling for help. A man, a complete stranger, comes and helps roll him over, and he's passed out, realizes his heart is not beating, starts doing CPR. My grandfather died that day. What I didn't really think about until years later, as I started processing that moment, was the man who came, complete stranger, to help roll him over and do CPR, literally breathed the last breath into my grandfather's body, was a Black man. So I'm in college, and I'm processing that. I took a class on memoir writing when I was a senior, and started writing about this part of my story, trying to figure out what is going on. Around the same time, so I'm starting to think like there's something really racist in my own family history. How do I deal with that? But I kind of thought of racism as something that was like in the distant past. Like these are events that happened when I was just a baby. You think like civil rights movement happened in the 60s. These things are mostly over. They were mostly over in the 70s. I was a RA here at UW-Madison, house fellow, if you know the terms they use around Madison, in Liz Waters' dorm, which is supposed to be the nice dorm, right? It was all women at the time. It was supposed to be easy. Midway through the year, I get a knock on my door, and a Black student who has a white roommate comes into my room, and she says, I grew up in Milwaukee in a neighborhood where it's 99% Black. I have never been around so many white people. My roommate has never been around a Black person. My roommate looks past me as if I don't exist. She never invites me to go to meals with her. She doesn't invite me to anything her friends do. She assumes I'm only going to be friends with the 2 other Black girls on the dorm floor. What do I do? And she's in tears. That happens. I'm like, I don't know what to tell her. I actually hosted an event in my dorm because I'm trying to figure this out. It was called Let's Talk About Race. 2 people came. They were both white. None of us knew what to talk about. Did not solve any problems. Later that semester, or later that year, I get a knock on my door again. I had just come back from a weekend away, and a student knocks on my door and says, did you hear what happened between these 2 roommates? Different set of roommates, also Black student and white student. And they say, over the weekend, this white student's parents came and put masking tape down the center of the dorm room floor and shouted at the Black student, you will not cross over onto our daughter's side of this dorm room. And I'm like, we have just recreated segregation right here in a dorm room on UW-Madison campus. I didn't have training to deal with this. And that kind of sent me into this life pattern of feeling like I have these questions and I don't know who to ask. How do I get answers to these questions? I took some classes at UW that helped me, but I feel like I was still like, I wish somebody would just be a mentor to me and tell me how to do this. And my life headed from there into international work. So I lived in Nicaragua, China, South Africa, like he mentioned. And South Africa, again, like racism was very much in my face, and did a PhD. But for the last 10 years, I've been teaching at Wheaton College. And one thing that comes with being an anthropologist is you teach classes on race. And I teach at this predominantly white Christian institution. And I realized, is what I'm doing working? I don't know. So about 5 years ago, I decided my next research project was going to be researching how white people actually develop long-term commitments to racial justice. Not just sort of take one class or read one book and are like, wow, this is terrible, I should do something, but actually, how do you develop a long-term posture to do that? So that became this book over here, Racial Justice for the Long Haul. You can see up there. It is officially out in less than a month, so you can order it already online. I was going to give you a talk that sort of summarizes what's in that, but I actually want to do something a little bit different that makes it a little more practical for you today. Before I do that, I will just say, so what I do, I mentioned I'm an anthropologist, and most people are like, oh, an anthropologist, do you know about this dig that happened in I don't know, somewhere in Israel, and it's like going back 10,000 years? And I'm like, no, I know nothing about that. I am not Indiana Jones. So anthropology has 4 subdisciplines. One of them is archaeology, which is kind of what Indy does. Although he would be totally not approved by the American Anthropological Association. Ethics, totally unethical. What I do is cultural anthropology, which looks a lot more like this, where basically I interview lots of people and I take a lot of notes and I hang out with people. So this book is based on 70 interviews with people, and a number of them were actually here in Madison. They're all anonymized, but you just might know some of the people who are in this book. So their stories are there. It's based on interviewing first 30 people of color who are faith leaders and asking them, what does racial justice look like? And then saying, do you know any white people who have been doing this for like a decade or more? And then talking to those people. So it's white people that were recommended for it, plus people of color. Okay, but now we need to get interactive. First, we're gonna jump to the chase. Here is sort of one of the biggest ideas that runs through this whole book. Racism engages heart, mind, soul, and strength. Race is not just a matter of like thinking wrong, believing wrong, having the wrong hatred in your soul or something like that. It's a combination of all these things. And so justice engages all those too. I had written this whole book and I had like the whole outline, and I looked back at it and I was like, oh, the sections of this book kind of line up with heart, mind, soul, strength. Now I kind of loosely interpret the Shema. It's called the biblical portion that says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength. I am not a Hebrew scholar, unlike somebody over here. But I usually loosely, those categories are helpful as a sort of mnemonic for how you can engage with racism, with your whole self, bringing your whole self into it. Now, what we're gonna do is University Press helped me create this really cool little sort of quiz that helps you find what is your strongest area out of those, heart, soul, mind, and strength, and what is an area for growth for you. Now, I imagine a lot of people are super phone savvy. I see people doing this already, and you can pull out your phone and you can use that QR code. You basically just put your camera on it, and it should bring you to a website. You put your camera on it, it'll get like a little yellow square or something around there. You click on that, it'll get you to the website. If you cannot do that, either you don't have a phone or you're just like, that seems scary, I understand. I have a few copies of it on paper. I only was able to print out 10 though. So who would like a paper copy of it right now? And if we have more than 10 people, you can just share with people around here or something. What I didn't think to bring is pencils. Okay, grab so if you have something to write with, yeah. Oh, else over here was like one. Is it working for some people? I see a whole app. Okay. So go ahead and just walk through that. There's like 20 short questions, and then it'll spit out an answer for you. Yeah. Okay, you guys share for now. If you don't get through the whole thing today, you can take that with you. But let me give you a few minutes to click on those answers. Maybe with a paper copy, you want to borrow a pen and pencil. I got 3 of them so far. All right, we got pencils and extra pencils. All right, anybody here? I'll take that one. You guys take that.
So for the moment, we're just going with the quiz that's from the QR code on the screen and filling that out. So that's why you're not hearing anything, but we'll be back in just a minute.
Yeah, I almost made it. Well, yeah, it was well.
You may need another paper copy.
When you get to the end, it will ask you for your email. InterVarsity Press requests that. It will put you on the InterVarsity Press email list. You can totally unsubscribe by scrolling to the bottom of whatever email they send you and just clicking unsubscribe. But that's how they set it up. And then it'll send you, or it'll give you the results.
And those of you who know Eric Miller, Kenya missionary, he's connected with InterVarsity, so InterVarsity has some credibility.
Yeah, they're good people. My husband worked for them for years, and they're the press that put this out. So. You guys are doing great.
Oh, how far are we?
You made it to the end. If you have made it through those, if you want to just turn to somebody next to you and tell them where you landed on it, and if you think it reflects something about you, this is not meant to be a sort of scientific study of really like nailing something that is true of you for all time. It's not a psychological test or anything. It's just meant to be a conversation starter to think about areas where you might grow. You want to turn to somebody for just a minute and say, was there a question that stood out to you, or do you feel like the results reflect you or not? That
Yeah, I thought it was actually.
All right, we'll pause there. That's just a gift you can take with you. And I'm going to cut you off, and I didn't give you a lot of time to talk, but we got more to come. So let me get your attention back up here for a sec. All right. We're gonna sort of walk through each of those 4 areas. And I want to give you sort of a tool or a handhold or an activity that will relate to each of those 4 areas. The idea is really that all of us need to continue to grow in each of those areas, but it's helpful sometimes to realize it's not just one of those. And hopefully kind of finding one that you lean toward helps you see like, oh, you have strengths in some area, and finding one that's less for you might give you an idea of ways that you could continue to grow. So what I don't have is sort of an explanation for why racism is bad. I also don't have 5 easy steps to help you solve it forever. What I really want us to do here is to just think about like, how do we bring our whole selves into acting for justice, into doing justice. So we're going to walk through these 4 areas. We're going to start with heart. And with this one, I find it helpful to name as a way of starting even any conversation about race. Sorry, is it helpful if I stay on this side? Okay. One thing that I notice as a professor is that when we start to have conversations about race and racism, emotions are in the room. And you have to remember that, right? Racism engages our emotions, whether we want it to or not. And channeling them in helpful directions is really key. One thing I have heard from another professor who teaches on race with this awesome book called Teaching About Race and Racism in the College Classroom is that we all have different forms of resistance when we're learning about topics, especially topics that bring in culpability, where we know that like getting it wrong isn't just like having the wrong answer on a math test. Getting it wrong is actually potentially hurting somebody. And so we have these sort of emotional responses to it. And one thing you can do is just be aware of your forms of resistance when you're confronted with ideas that feel unfamiliar or uncomfortable, or even like witnessing someone else say or do something that seems racist. What do you do? How do you respond? And we have these different forms of resistance. One is passive, where your form might be like, I just want to walk away. It literally is like, for students, it's like not showing up on that day in the class when syllabus says race. And this is actually more common among students of color than white students to have a passive resistance style. It can be really hard, especially at a predominantly white institution, to be the one person of color in the room who's getting talked about and singled out in that moment. Another form of resistance is active resistance. This is the person who's raising their hand constantly and saying, but have you heard about this? Have you thought about it this way? I think it's actually just your opinion that racism happened, right? So it's like jumping into it right away. Not necessarily wrong either, but being aware of how that works. And then dualistic thinking is where you're confronted by these kinds of tensions and you want to just say it's either or. Like, I am a good person or I'm a bad person. You're a good person or you're a bad person. Or like, either it's like the Democrats have the whole solution or the Republicans have the whole solution, and we can't find gray areas in between. So what I encourage you to do is give yourself permission to feel and to be vulnerable. Learning and acting in response to racism involves being vulnerable for everyone. But also don't retreat. So notice those forms of resistance and say, how do I still show up in this moment? I want to give you a photo that I actually talk about in my book. I don't know how clearly you can see this because it's a little dark. Can you see what happened here? Okay, so I love this because there's always like a chuckle in the room when I show this image. Anyone, what do you think happened? How would you describe this?
They
Stuck?
They thought they could make it through.
Yeah, so like somebody's driving, they see the beautiful blue sky on the other side, the mountains, they believe it's gonna work, and they just keep going. right? And this is, I feel like, so often a description of what it feels like to encounter racism. You have a vision of how reality is supposed to work, that I can just keep driving in this direction, but reality is otherwise. There are certain concrete walls that you are going to crash into because they are real. I call this a collision. Moments in life, similar to like when I first learned that my own grandfather, who seemed like such a nice guy, had not allowed his own son-in-law to enter his home because he was Black. Moments like the parents showing up and putting masking tape down the floor, where reality clashes with the way that you imagine the world so forcefully that you can't ignore it. These are moments that engage our hearts. You can't make it happen if you're like, oh, I want to like be better at solving racism. I'll just go find a collision. You can't make it happen, shouldn't make it happen. But one thing you can do, if you're looking for practical steps, is reflect on these in your life. If we had more time, I would actually give you that question to discuss with somebody, but maybe take it to lunch today or something. Talk about, when did you experience a collision moment? When did reality clash with your imagination of reality so forcefully that you couldn't ignore it? These are often the times when we notice injustice, and it propels us toward doing something about it. I want to just read a quote from somebody I interviewed. This is a white woman who is describing what I would call a collision moment. She was talking about going into a training when she was a college student. She went to this workshop, and it was about whiteness, I think it was called. And she's like, I didn't even know whiteness was a word. And she says, I remember going to that session, and like everything that they shared was new information to me. Like I had never heard of white privilege before. I mean, I didn't even have any friends of color. And she said, it just shook me to my core. And after that session, I just went back to my room and just cried for hours, just kind of processing that my experience in the world was very much not everybody's experience in the world, which feels so ignorant and naive now, but that's where I was coming from. A thing to notice about this is she's shocked not just that there was injustice, but that she didn't know about it. And that's a common experience I noticed across this pattern of 40 white people that I interviewed, is that the shock of collisions is often you're an adult and you're like, how did I never know that someone could experience this? For people of color, they describe collisions in their lives too, but the shock is often, this happens all the time. My parents had this happen, my grandparents had this happen, I had it happen every single week, right? So the frequency of it is really different between people of color and white people. But they're transformative and they're heart engaging for both people. So paying attention to those. Okay, part 2, we're going to talk about doing justice with all your mind. Now, this is the area that as a professor, I feel like when I started teaching about race, this is what I did. I sent people a lot of information. I'd show these charts that are like, look, can you see that, for example, the median household assets of white people is 10 times what it is for Black people in our country. So you look at a statistic like that, and I thought, you just give people a bunch of information and that changes their life. Well, it's part of it, and that's really what I learned in doing this research. Information is important, but it's only part of the story. And often, because information is tied to our emotions, if it feels uncomfortable, we actually don't even take in that information. So I've learned that something that you can do is kind of like give people information in a way that's kind of fun. And I want to actually, I think we have time for this. We're going to do an activity. This is where we're going to actually ask you to stand up in a moment and do an activity that I love doing with my students. Because it teaches us information about racism in a way that kind of like lets your emotions be fun, okay? So here is my task for you. And we're gonna try to do this in like 3 minutes or less. Ready? We'll see how we do. It's a difficult task. I guarantee you've never done it before. I want you to line up according to your ear shape, okay? Now, we need everybody in a line. And this is a big room, so we're going to see how this goes. We need everybody in a line, and we're going to start one end of it here and one end of it over here. And I would like you to just kind of stand up and start organizing yourselves by ear shape. Go.
I'm just going to stand here to make sure nobody trips on
I know, I gotta be somewhere in the middle of this.
So that me and Scott sit there and just say, where's the mic?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, okay. Yeah, we would love to know, like it's an undefined term.
You think you're there? I've got a pretty good road. I don't know. I just got hit. Oh no, you're not. You're how about? Yes. Oh, well, we got a big word. Jennifer Morgan has a little more. How are we coming? I have a good load.
Well, we all have ears.
That's one good sign. Who's got a good
What if someone didn't have ears? How would they feel?
Gonna feel like isolated, you know?
Right.
If you're trying, I don't really memorize the ears.
Should we organize a little bit? Go by earlobe and have Scott and Michael point you in the areas. Come up to the front and Michael and Scott will quickly rate your earlobe and treat you earlobe in
We
line.
go that way, that way, that way.
What? Where do I have to
That
go?
way, that way.
So,
Yeah, that way.
yeah,
Oh, you used to go to the very end.
Okay, Scott.
wider.
That way.
Scott and Michael will point us at your face on earlobe.
Oh, we don't want to do that. I'm going back here.
But to kind of make one, you all just kind of like move over that way. You all kind of just move over that way. So you can envision a sort of line around the room. Sorry, folks, you're just gonna have to go over here.
Right there.
Okay. Now, well, first, let me just read back a few things that I heard. I always love sort of catching some quotes as this happened. I heard someone say, I have never looked at my ears. I need you to look at my ears for me, and I'll look at yours. Somebody's saying, oh, I get to be by you. Somebody's saying, this is an undefined term. What is shape? A lot of you started looking for detached and unattached earlobes. How many people started looking at detached and unattached earlobes? Yeah, usually that comes up. Sometimes there are people who say things along the lines of like, oh, because that's biological. We have somebody taking control of the microphone and saying, we will just do this for you. They will sort you. I love that. Take control. Have power. Yeah, okay, so now here's my question for you. Which is the better end of the line?
It's the middle.
The middle.
Tepid middle.
How do we decide? Well, first, let me hear some of the ways that you decided. Anybody over in this end who actually decided to be there based on something? I know at some point we decided.
Earlobe privilege.
Earlobe.
Earlobe privilege.
Tell me about these earlobes. How are they? You're attached. Okay. What about somebody over here? How did you decide to be on this end, or how did you decide to move this way? Yeah.
I think I decided it was an impossible job, and we didn't do anything.
You. Anybody else who had a means of deciding? Yeah.
I'm just noticing we're sort of shaped like an ear.
Other means of deciding which side of somebody around you you're going to be on.
Well, actually, I looked at this, I think your ears look kind of like mine. So let's see if it's-
Okay. What do you think made it look similar?
Yeah, I'm the shilling scheme too.
Yeah. Who are the people who are supposed to go to the front and sort for us? Is that? Yeah. Okay. What's your name? Scott.
Scott.
What qualifications were you going to use?
I didn't have any
Okay,
qualifications.
let's say it's your job.
Oh.
You have to have some. What would you use?
What I tried to use was just that your little bif is detached.
Okay.
And I was trying to get detached over there and
Okay,
attached
yeah,
to
so
it.
we got basically two categories.
But it didn't work.
Okay, yeah.
'Cause I
Did you have, Michael, did you have another?
I was also looking at like width of earlobe, like who had thinner, who had wider, so detached or not detached, and thinner versus sort of wider.
So sometimes when I give people more time to do this, they will actually like come up with measurements, they'll write on a piece of paper with like, here's like large and here's small, and how to start measuring along with your ears. Very often they attach, detach, sort of like one side of the room versus the other. Okay. I forget were you detached or attached earlobes? Which should we say? Attached, okay. Do we all think that attached or detached is better? You should research why.
Actually, I hate to say this, but there has been research for cardiology.
Oh.
You can maybe back me up on
Yes.
this. People with attached tend to have more heart issues than.
Oh.
Well, good luck. Good luck, Buster.
So yours is better. Really? Okay. So now we know this is the good side of the room. Okay. When I do this with students, I will often say, I have 100 points of extra credit. You get to distribute how you want it, but you only get to give it to up to 10 people in the room. And so whichever side is the better side is getting extra credit together, and then they'll argue it out. And they have to come up with the best reason why it is the better or worse side. Okay. The question that I often ask then is, so where is the dividing line? And that makes a really tricky discussion too, right? So where do we cut it off? Where do we go from detached to attached, right? Or large to small, or whatever the category is, right? Okay, so here's my question. Yeah.
It's interesting that we can't see our own ears.
Yeah,
So
right.
only someone else can judge our ears.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's why.
So how is this similar to or different from racism? What do you notice?
Wow.
You're picking characteristics to group people.
Yeah, they're picking characteristics arbitrarily, right?
Yeah.
So we have learned to see skin color, but is that actually attached to anything else true about our personhood? No, it's just some category that somebody made up years ago to sort people. What else is similar or different? Yeah.
We're making up excuses and reasons why we can justify separating this.
Yes, right. So you already have decided where you are, and then you're deciding who's better or worse. So racism was designed by a group of people, Europeans at a certain time in history, who made the categories so that they could be the best category. And then they started saying, oh, we're also smarter. Oh, and we also have this and this and this, right? And so they sort of like design what is attached to that category, what fits in that category based on already assuming they're the better ones. Yeah, what else?
And then also
Oh, go ahead.
I appreciate also, as Jenny said to me, she's like, Nick, I don't think you're supposed to have the mic. And I said, I think this is an educational opportunity. How people also try to solve the problem. They try to take control and push things in different directions with arbitrary, and so who's actually judging, and also what are the things we're judging.
Yeah, so if you look at the history of race, there's things like the one drop rule, which was to say that Black people, if there's any percentage, but then the Native Americans, it was like a higher percentage. So you're trying to make these arbitrary lines somewhere, and somebody with power does that. Yeah.
There's not actually only attached and detached. There's like a whole spectrum of different levels of attachment with your earlobes.
Yeah. And what we do, so we often think like, oh, it's about skin tone. Yeah, that's the sort of basic understanding people have of race often is it's about skin tone. But we also look at all kinds of other things, right? Like eye shape, nose shape, ways people walk, ways people talk, and we add that into the equation too. Your hand up.
I realized as I was processing that, and I didn't say it before because I felt like it was the wrong thing to say, but I looked at Lindsay and I thought, her ear looks normal. I think my ear looks normal.
Yeah.
In terms of norms of race.
Excellent. Yeah. So over time, this gets normalized, especially if you're spending all your time in your category.
Whatever, what is a
Yeah.
normal ear?
And you start to look at it. Yeah. Which is how whiteness works. Yes, it becomes the norm, and everybody else is just has to get names. Yeah.
We bought the assumption unquestioningly that we should be with people who have ears like ours.
Yeah.
I like to be with people who have other kind of ears.
Right.
Yeah.
We get no say in this. This is what we're born. Plastic surgery and such, but basically, we're all stuck.
So imagine too, if this was something you were taught by your parents and your grandparents and your schools. This is how your neighborhoods are organized and your churches are organized. Suddenly you see all these things as if they depend on your shape, but they don't. We can be handed that. Another thing that I find helpful for people to understand is how race is both passed on from your parents, but is not an accurate biological description of someone. So if you think about my cousin, we share common grandparents, but the world will look at her and racialize her as black and racialize me as white, but our genetics are very similar, right? And so genetics is not necessarily tied to how much, or like how you are racialized. Okay, have a seat. Thank you for doing this. Great job. As we sit down, I'll just keep talking. So I do this because I think it gives you a touch point to really understand a lot of how race works in a quick way. One thing you get out of this is it's a social construct. It's a made up category, but social constructs has social consequences. Our life is organized around this category that we made up. Now, there's so much more you could do along these lines. So learning about race with the mind is an ongoing process also. It's not something that you just sort of get done with one book. And I imagine you're people who do this already. Like, I could be wrong, but I feel like the kind of people who show up to a workshop like this are already like, oh yeah, I'm learning about race. Great, keep doing that. Here's just a quote from somebody, oops. I got stuck. A quote from somebody in my research. This was a white woman who moved into an urban, under-resourced neighborhood as part of a project that was, she was about 25, and it was like learning about race through this work that she was doing. And she said this: the kids in the neighborhood came over to our house all the time, and I'm wondering a lot about like why they're in the situations they're in. Why are these sweet kids eating Cheetos all day? And their dad comes home and he's not kind to them, and mom is working nights, and yeah, so asking a lot of why. I love this because she started with this very simple thing of these kids from poor households are eating Cheetos a lot. Like, that's pretty simple, but she starts asking why. And then she realizes, oh, that ties to this and this and this and this. So living a life of asking why questions is sort of an action point with this. Okay, we got about 10-ish, 5-ish minutes left, and we're gonna do the next two kind of briefly. So doing justice with all your strength. With this one, the strength for me is just sort of a marker to say, this is embodied. You actually have to like put yourself in places that you're gonna try it out. I describe it as kind of like learning to dance. You can't just read books about dancing. You have to actually show up sometimes. And looking at this room of mostly white people, that means often being in places where we're not in the majority. And that means a different kind of a feeling than what it's like to be in the majority. And so you're like learning how to just be in communities doing stuff that might make you uncomfortable. People often ask me, so what's one thing I can do? How do I like put this into action? There's not just one simple action step you can take. Like I said, I'm not giving you 5 simple actions, but I do want to give you a way to sort of frame what kinds of actions you could take. So if you've ever been in like an airport where there's like a moving walkway, right, like this, right? Imagine how you get on this walkway and it's just carrying you along. And you can do a couple different things. You can stand in place and it takes you there. You can also walk and you're moving there even faster. Now, imagine this moving walkway is taking you somewhere that you should not go, right? It's taking you into a fire or something like that. But you don't know there's a fire on the other end until somebody starts running the opposite direction and they're like, there's a fire at the other end of the walkway, get off the walkway. Well, you could believe them or you could think they're kind of strange, right? And so you have choices, right? So you could just sort of like slow down, walk more slowly, or you could stop walking and let the walkway still take you there. You could turn around, walk the opposite direction, and start telling people also, get off the walkway, it's going the wrong way. But now imagine this walkway is taking us all in the wrong direction. What else could you do? What else could you do?
Jump off.
Jump off? Get off it entirely? Yep, great.
Press the stop button.
Press the stop button. Yeah, what else? Yeah.
Go the other way.
Yeah, keep going the other way. Tell everybody else. Yeah, you could start dismantling the whole thing, right? Take a sledgehammer to it, tear it apart, whatever you want to do, right? And so you can think about responses to racism along those lines. Especially when you're talking to other people around you. There might be people that you're like, oh my goodness, their views seem so racist. What's going wrong with them, right? And realize this is a lifetime journey. So you might take baby steps with them. I'm just kind of like getting them to keep going, or to move a little slower, or to stop moving, or to slowly turn around, right? And tell people around you. But also think about how you dismantle the system, right? What is actually going on that is reproducing this for future generations? So for example, in my life, I'm a professor. One of the ways that I can help dismantle the system and take apart the walkway that's moving us in an unjust direction is to say, what happens with first generation students who came from poverty, or students who are from underrepresented racial or ethnic groups? How do I create classroom environments and a whole college environment where they're going to feel welcome enough that they're going to thrive in their college education and they're going to move into, good jobs, and sort of think about it from where I'm at. One way to think about this is start where you're at and don't stay there. So look around you. What are the jobs you're in, the neighborhood you're in, and how do you start acting from there? And this is a lifetime process. This is a quote from a man who said, I'm not taking selfies of myself while I'm doing this. So who cares if you're uncomfortable? If you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing. Another quote, this is from a Black woman that I interviewed, and I just finished the interview, and I always ask this question of like, is there anything else you want me to make sure that I say if I can get it into the book? And she said, it's a call to do. Don't let it be just a book that you read. So I like to tell people that. If you get this book, don't let it be just a book you read. Do something out of it. Okay, last section, doing justice with all your soul. What time do I actually need to send you on your way?
Like about 4 minutes.
4 minutes, great, okay.
Yeah, we're a little past time, but we're in it.
Okay, I got one more little story that I'll just use to wrap up. So it's a week before Christmas, not this year, but 2001. I am living in Nicaragua. I've been there for about 6 months. I came there thinking I was going to bring goodness and justice and hope and loveliness to this community in Nicaragua because I'm 22 and surely I can do these things. And it's the season of the year when people are harvesting coffee. I'm in this village in Nicaragua that depends upon the coffee harvest. People come from miles around to harvest coffee. The idea is you get paid about 3 days before Christmas, and then you go home and you do all of your Christmas shopping. And really, it's like about a third of people's annual income comes in one paycheck right before Christmas. So it's 3 days before Christmas now, and I'm at the house of my friend who is the president of this village and in charge of the coffee cooperative. He's looking really sad. We're eating dinner, and I'm like, what's going on? And there's like these sort of quiet conversations in the back room. I'm like, what's going on? And he says, we just found out that we're not getting a loan, and we don't have any money to pay the coffee harvesters tomorrow. So nobody's gonna have any Christmas money. And that seems horrible. But being the optimistic young woman that I am, I'm like, hang on, I got friends and family. How much money do you need? They're like, well, if we had even just like $5,000, like that would be enough to hold us over. I'm like, we're gonna go to the city tomorrow. I'm gonna get my parents to ask their friends or whatever. They got bank accounts. We're gonna get $5,000 and save Christmas. You know, this is like the Hallmark movie. Christine Jeske, saving Christmas with my husband Adam. So I go back to, my husband was not at dinner because he was feeling sick. Go back to the room where we're staying. I asked my husband if we could do this. He's like, yes, but I feel so bad. He has a fever now of like 102 degrees. I'm like, oh no, this is another problem to deal with, but it's fine. I'm 22, I can handle it. So we used up the last of our acetaminophen that night, keeping his fever down. Turns out he had malaria, which we found out the next day when we eventually got to a doctor. But before that, so this village, that we lived in did not have any buses, didn't have any public transportation. It had one tractor. So the next day, the tractor takes us to the city. It's like a 2-hour ride on the back of a tractor. That's how you get to the city. We get to the city. My husband is like dripping sweat and just about passing out. And we're like, okay, we have to get to the phone because we didn't have a phone in our village. We have to get to the Western Union where we're going to get money wired. We call my parents. They say, yes, we will send it to you. I'm like, yes, we got this. We walk all the way across the city to the other side of the city to the Western Union. It's the day before, it's 2 days before Christmas. And so it's packed out with all these people getting money from their relatives. The line was like out the door, just down the street. We wait for hours to get to the place where we can stand at the counter, ask for the money. I get up there, tell them my name, and they're like, we don't have any money for you today. I'm like, what? No, I know my parents just did this. And the telephone's on the other side of town because like there are not payphones anywhere else. So I'm like, it's here. I know it's here. And they like turn me away. I'm like, no, I'm not leaving until you give me $5,000. And they look again and they're like, oh, it went to Managua, which is a 4-hour ride away. Oh. And the tractor has to get back to the village before dark. And my husband is sitting on the curb, like with his eyes closed, drenched in sweat, like almost passed out. And I come back to him and I sit down. I'm like, we don't have any money. And I just like start bawling. And in that moment, what came back to me was a conversation I'd had a few days earlier with my dear friend, Yaya, who's this elderly woman. She's a widow. And she had said to me, she's like, what are you doing on Christmas? And I had said, well, I'm actually going in the city to visit these other friends we know. And she's like, oh, you're going to have a ham and you're going to have bread and you're going to have all these things. You're going to have a real Christmas. That's what she said to me. And in that moment, I suddenly realized I am having right now a real Christmas. This is what Christmas was. It was Jesus showing up at a time and place where everything was going wrong, right? He's in a barn. He shouldn't have been born there. He's in this oppressed group of people. It's not working out. And why I share that story is because I think at the core of having a commitment to racial justice for the long haul is you have to learn how to hope. You have to know that things are not just going to turn out because they have turned out well in your life. They are going to turn out well if and only if God shows up and makes good things happen in the middle of the bad. And this is the narrative that I heard over and over again from people that I interviewed, was you have this hope that's not built on expecting things to just go right, because they do, but it's rooted in Jesus Christ entering into the bad with the good and sort of living out of that narrative. The heart of like sort of having a soul committed to racial justice is being able to have answers to these questions. How and why do we hope? How do we deal with guilt and shame? How do we deal with fear and grief? I'm going to leave you with that. If you at some point want to hear my sort of longer talk about what all is in the book, you can invite me back sometime. Happy to do it. And check out the book.
I'm writing that down.
I just want to, I'm going to leave this up here. I just want to read the last sentence of this. It is scratchy, bleedy work. That's what you're being invited into. It's not going to be easy. It's scratchy, bleedy work. But I'm so glad that you are people who are ready for that. And so bless you on that journey. Since you're so good at QR codes, I'm going to put this one up here too if you want it. This just sends you to a free chapter from the book. And also you can check a box on there to sign up for my newsletter if you want to. But we also have a sign up over there. You can write by hand if you want to sign up for the newsletter. Thank you so much for staying. I'll let you get into the church service, but I really appreciate it.
Did you get the loan?
Oh, no, they didn't. Like literally people didn't get paid until a week after Christmas. It was horrible. Yeah, and the coffee price was the lowest it had been in 50 years. So yeah, there's more horrible stories to follow that one. Yeah.
And your husband survived.
He did. He got meds.
Are we on channel?